She sipped the bitter coffee, letting the warmth creep slowly into her hands, while her eyes scanned the room, carefully noting every subtle movement of the other patrons. The man at the counter adjusted his tie nervously and glanced at her more. Then once she noticed, but gave nothing away. Her tattoo curled slightly under the fabric of her shirt, revealing just enough to make people whisper and laugh quietly. But the ink itself told a story that no one in this cafe could even imagine. It began at her shoulder with a serpent that wound itself around a dagger and continued down her arm into symbols and numbers that marked every mission, every operation, every life she had taken or saved. The colors were vivid blues and reds, but the shading made it look almost like it moved when the light hit it just right. She had learned long ago that appearances mattered, that people judged before they knew, and that the right perception could be a weapon. She leaned back in her chair and let her hood slide slightly lower, covering her face more completely, while she took out a small notebook and began to write. The notebook was filled with sketches and observations of everyone in the cafe. It was not a diary in the conventional sense, but a record of behavior, a catalog of potential threats and patterns. She had learned to read people the way others read books, and the cafe was no exception. The barista had twitchy hands and kept looking over his shoulder, which indicated nervousness, or perhaps fear. She noted the man in the corner who was talking loudly on his phone and smiling at nothing. He seemed dangerous in his overconfidence, but in reality he was just careless. Her pen moved swiftly across the page, recording details that would later make the difference between life and death. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, creating a rhythm that matched the beat of her heart. She had trained herself to notice such things, the subtle vibrations, the way the air smelled, before a car passed, the flicker of a shadow under a doorway. All of it mattered. Everything was a clue. She was waiting, and she knew they would come. It was only a matter of time. She had no intention of being surprised. The laughter and whispers continued. Around her, oblivious to the fact that the woman they mocked had survived events that would have shattered most people. They saw only the surface, the bright tattoo, the hooded figure with her coffee and notebook, but they did not see the night spent. In foreign cities, the missions completed under darkness and danger, the friends she had lost, and the skills she had acquired to survive. She allowed a small smirk to touch her lips as the barista tripped over his words and the couple in the corner argued loudly about something trivial. Her smirk was almost imperceptible, but it was there, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she had the upper hand, even if they did not realize it yet. She shifted slightly in her chair and allowed her eyes to meet briefly with another patron, a young man with a camera. He had been taking pictures of the street from inside the cafe for a while. She assessed him quickly, not a threat, but curious. She made a mental note of his movements and the direction of his gaze. Then she returned her attention to the notebook, drawing a line that connected the symbols on her tattoo to locations and events she had memorized. The ink told a story that only she fully understood. Every line, a memory, every color, a code. She ran her fingers lightly over the tattoo beneath her shirt, remembering the training, the missions, the adrenaline, and the fear. The door opened and the wind brought in the smell of rain mixed with exhaust and wet pavement. She looked up, casually, and saw nothing unusual, but her senses were already scanning. She could hear a soft shuffle of shoes on wet concrete and the subtle click of a lighter in the distance. She noted the temperature shift and the angle of the light reflecting off the puddles. She wrote a quick note in her notebook, observing the small details that would tell her later what had passed by. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. She did not check it immediately. Instead, she listened. She could tell from the subtle movements in the cafe that someone had entered, and that they were waiting to see her. She kept her posture relaxed and unassuming, letting the laughter continue around her. The young man with the camera smiled at something he had captured. and she smiled faintly in return, almost invisible to him. She had mastered the art of appearing ordinary while her mind raced with calculations, contingency plans, and escape routes. A man at a table near the window laughed loudly at something on his screen, and she allowed a small chuckle to escape without drawing attention. Her eyes flicked briefly to the door again, noting the angle of the light and the faint shadow that moved across the threshold. She could see the reflection of her tattoo, partially in the glass, and she traced it lightly with her finger under the table, as if remembering each line and symbol. She had made a promise long ago that she would never let her past mistakes define her, but she also knew that the world was cruel and unforgiving, and she had to be ready. The cafe seemed suddenly quieter, although the laughter continued in fits and bursts. She felt the familiar tension in her shoulders and allowed herself to breathe slowly, letting the muscles relax and tighten in preparation. She could sense that the moment was approaching, the one that would require every skill she had honed over years of training in the most dangerous and impossible situations. She took another sip of coffee, letting it burn, slightly as a reminder that she was alive, that she was ready. The tattoo had started with a mission that had gone wrong a long time ago, and had continued through every challenge she had faced since. It was a map of survival, a record of victories and failures, and a warning to anyone who underestimated her. She touched the edge of the tattoo lightly and wrote another note in the notebook, connecting it to a location she had memorized long before she stepped into the cafe. She was not just a woman with a tattoo. She was a force that could not be ignored, and soon those who laughed would learn that the ink was only the surface. The barista called out an order, and her eyes flicked toward the counter, noticing the movements of his hands, the way he stacked cups and wiped the counter. She made a note of every detail, knowing that even the smallest clue could be significant later. The young couple in the corner argued more loudly, and she allowed her gaze to drift toward them, noting the tension in their posture, the subtle signs of discomfort, and the way the man kept glancing toward her table. She smiled faintly, knowing that they had no idea who she was or what she represented. She closed the notebook slowly and let her hands rest on the table as if relaxing. She allowed her hood to fall slightly further down her face, obscuring her expression and the tattoo once again. Her eyes remained sharp and alert, scanning the room and the street outside. She felt the rhythm of the rain and the city and matched it with her own internal beat. She was ready for whatever was coming, and she knew that soon the laughter would end and the true story of the tattoo would be revealed. She shifted in her chair and let the pen rest. Beside the notebook, her eyes lingered on the door for a long moment, noticing a subtle change in the reflection of the glass. She could sense a presence and a movement that others would miss. She remained calm, letting the laughter and whispers continue around her. The cafe was a stage. The world was unaware of the danger seated quietly at the corner table. She allowed a faint smirk to cross her lips and touched the tattoo lightly beneath her shirt, reminding herself that every line told a story that would soon be understood by those who needed to see it. The rain poured harder, now streaking down the sidewalks and washing the city in a silver sheen. She moved along the street with practiced ease, her coat pulled tight and her hood low over, her face every step calculated and silent. Her eyes scanned the buildings and the shadows, looking for the faintest sign of movement, a flicker, a reflection, or a shift that indicated someone was watching. She knew they were coming, and she had already prepared every contingency, every escape route, every angle of attack. She was not afraid, but she was cautious. Every muscle in her body coiled like a spring, ready to react. She paused at the corner and looked up at the tall office building across the street, the glass windows reflecting the neon signs and the wet pavement. She could see the faint shapes of people inside, but her attention was on the figure she had noticed earlier. Two men in suits moving with purpose across the street. They were confident and unaware of her observation. Yet every movement they made was catalogued in her mind, every subtle gesture analyzed and remembered. She shifted her position slightly behind a column, allowing the shadow to conceal her from their view while she prepared her sniper rifle concealed beneath her coat. The rifle was compact and lightweight, but powerful. She had trained for years to use it in confined spaces, crowded cities, and under extreme conditions. The scope was fitted with a digital overlay that allowed her to mark targets and track movement with precision. Her fingers rested lightly on the trigger, and her breathing was steady and controlled. She had been through situations far more dangerous than this yet. The anticipation made her pulse quicken in a familiar way. She adjusted the hood slightly and peered through the scope without revealing herself, noting the alignment of the men and the angle of the street. The two men paused near a doorway, speaking quietly and checking their watches. She could hear fragments of their conversation, though it was muffled by the rain and the distance. They were discussing a package and a delivery as if unaware that the woman in the hooded coat had been observing them for hours. She moved slightly to a better vantage point, her boots silent against the wet pavement, and her mind running through the plan step by step. She had contingencies for contingencies, and the smallest mistake on their part would give her the advantage she needed. A taxi splashed through a puddle nearby, and she adjusted her aim, briefly noting the reflection in the wet street. The city was alive with movement and noise, yet she could isolate the relevant details: the posture, the shadows, the subtle signs of awareness, or lack thereof. She wrote a mental note of the timing of every passing car, every flicker of light, every movement in the periphery. She had trained for this precision all her life, and the tattoo beneath her hood reminded her of every mission, every choice that had brought her here. The men moved again, heading toward the cafe where she had been earlier but taking a different entrance. She noted the security cameras and their blind spots, marking them in her mind for later analysis. She ducked behind a pillar and adjusted her position once more, making sure her line of sight was perfect. Her finger hovered above the trigger as she allowed herself to survey the scene one last time before action was necessary. The wind and rain were in her favor, masking sound and movement. She had become one with the environment, using it as an extension of her senses. Inside the cafe, the barista was closing up, and the customers had thinned to a few, who were oblivious to the silent tension building outside. She could see through the glass and the reflections that one of the men paused and looked around suspiciously. She noted the angle of his head, the subtle shift in his weight, the tension in his shoulders. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The slightest misstep would give her the opening she needed. She adjusted her grip on the rifle and allowed her mind to focus entirely on the target. The man stepped into a shadowed doorway, and she followed the movement through the scope. Her breathing was slow and measured, letting the calm override the anticipation. The rain dripping from the eaves created a rhythm she matched internally to steady her pulse. She could see the outline of the second man, pausing behind the first, checking a phone, and unaware that he had walked directly into the center of her field of view. She adjusted the scope and began tracking both targets simultaneously, calculating distance, speed, wind direction, and potential obstacles. Suddenly, a dog barked in the distance, and she waited, allowing the sound to blend with the rain. She moved her finger slightly along the trigger, maintaining total control. Her eyes flicked to the tattoo partially revealed. Beneath her coat, a reminder of every mission she had survived, every challenge she had overcome, every lesson learned. The ink, a map of survival and precision. She allowed a small smirk to cross her face, knowing that the men had no idea who they were dealing with or how lethal the woman they ignored truly was. A cyclist passed by, narrowly missing a puddle that would have revealed her position, and she adjusted her aim accordingly, the digital overlay in the scope highlighted subtle movements. She would have missed with the naked eye, and she marked the doorway where the first man stood, calculating the exact moment she would act. Her mind moved faster than the raindrops sliding down the street, faster than the cars rushing by. And yet, she was patient, letting the timing be perfect. The first man turned, slightly glancing down at his phone, and that was all the opening she needed. Her finger pressed gently on the trigger, and a subtle vibration passed through the rifle, a warning more. Felt, then heard. The second man froze, sensing something was off, but it was too late. She lowered the hood slowly, allowing the tattoo to be visible in the dim light. The serpent coiled around the dagger, and the symbols trailing down her neck catching. The faint neon glow. They froze, their laughter cut short, the realization of her identity and capability hitting them before any words could be spoken. The barista behind the counter paused mid-motion, his hand suspended over a cup as he caught sight of her through the glass. He did not understand what he was seeing, only that something had changed and the tension in the air was palpable. She did not fire the weapon yet. Her presence alone was enough to communicate the warning that would be remembered. Long after the rain stopped, the men looked at each other uncertain. Their confidence drained away in an instant, replaced by the silent acknowledgement of danger they had underestimated. She lowered the rifle slightly, allowing the hood to fall further. Back, revealing the tattoo fully to anyone watching, her eyes scanned the street one last time, noting the route they had taken and the exit points in case further action was required. She felt the familiar rush of control and clarity as every element aligned, and the threat had been neutralized without a single shot. Her mind cataloged every detail, the reactions, the expressions, the subtle signs of fear and respect that now replaced the laughter and mockery. The SEAL commander watched from a distance, the live feed from a hidden camera, his expression unreadable as he observed her movements, the precision, the calm, the lethal efficiency. It was rare for him to be silent, but he was. He knew her skill and training, yet seeing it in real time reminded him of the truth that she was more than they had all believed. Her tattoo was not just ink, it was a signal, a history, and a warning to anyone who misjudged her. She took a deep breath, letting the rain wash over her as she packed the rifle into its compact case and moved back into the shadows. Her presence was now a memory to those who had laughed and an unmistakable warning that survival and skill were never to be underestimated. She disappeared into the wet streets, blending with the night. The rain masking her steps, the tattoo still visible in her mind, and a promise of future encounters unspoken, yet inevitable. The command center was dimly lit, screens flickering with streams of data and live feeds from the field. The SEAL commander stood motionless, his eyes locked on the feed showing her movements outside the cafe. His usual composure had vanished, replaced by a rare and uneasy silence. He watched as she disappeared into the rain, blending with shadows like a ghost trained, and deadly, every motion precise, calculated, and deliberate. The tattoo on her neck glowed faintly under the neon reflections, a map of missions, survival, and skill that no one could misinterpret. He remembered the first day he had met her in the academy, the laughter, the challenges, the competitions, and the endless drills. She had been a prodigy even then, but no one could have predicted the lethal precision she had developed, the patience, the calm under pressure, and the unflinching focus that now defined her. Her colleagues had underestimated her, and the world had mocked her, and yet here she was, proving in silence what true capability looked like. The feed shifted to show the two men in suits, frozen mid-step, their confidence replaced by confusion and fear. The command center was quiet, except for the soft hum of machines and the faint tapping of keyboards. The SEAL commander whispered nothing as he realized fully the implications of what he was seeing. Her presence alone had neutralized. The threat, no shots fired, No alarms, tripped only the quiet dominance of skill experience and lethal intent. Her thought of the missions they had undertaken together, the training exercises, the close calls, the nights spent planning and preparing, had known she was extraordinary. But seeing it executed with such flawless timing left him speechless. He could only watch as she moved back into the shadows, the rain masking her departure, the world still unaware of the force it had just encountered. Inside, the control room operators shifted uneasily, aware of the tension in the air, but unsure of what had caused the silence that fell over the normally bustling space. The SEAL commander remained still, eyes fixed on the screens, every line of the tattoo, every movement catalogued and analyzed. He knew that this was a turning point, that the laughter, the mockery, and the underestimation would never return. The woman who had been underestimated had become a living warning and a testament to precision, patience, and deadly skill. He exhaled slowly, realizing that the world had misjudged her. The young woman he had trained and joked with had become a figure who commanded respect without speaking a word. The tattoo was a map, a signal, and now a symbol of unspoken authority and capability. The SEAL commander finally turned from the screens, a rare expression crossing his face, a mixture of awe, recognition, and silent acknowledgement that she was unstoppable and that the world had just witnessed a glimpse of true power.